Okay, for this video we're going to be looking at distance on the coordinate plane. So we're going to be looking at finding distance between points on a coordinates plane. So let's consider the points negative 4, 0, and 5, 0. So let's think about those points, negative 4, 0, and 5, 0. What do they have in common? Well, just looking at them, I can see that they both have y-coordinates of 0. So I'm going to write that down. Both have y coordinates of 0. Now if I think a little bit further about that, if I think, okay, both of their y coordinates are 0, and I know that if a coordinate is 0, that means it's on an axis, I should have an idea that both of these numbers are going to lie on an axis. So let me think about that for a second. Let me plot this to help sort of visualize it. If I have negative 4, 0, I'm going to go on my x negative 4 and up 0, so I have a point right there. If I have 5, 0, I'm going to go to the right 5 and up 0 right there. Whoops, right there. So now looking at these, I know because they both have a y-coordinate of 0, they were on an axis, and now I know specifically they're both on the x-axis. Okay, now if they ask me to find the distance between them, I need to find the distance between the negative 4, 0 and 5, 0. I'm going to think to myself, okay, they form a straight line. I can see that between these 2 points is a straight line right there. And if I'm really thinking, I'm thinking, okay, I can find how far away those numbers are from 0, and if I know how far away they are each from 0, I could just add those two together, and that's going to give me my total distance. And let's think, if I'm finding how far away something is from 0, what am I finding? The absolute value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the absolute value of both of those numbers, both of those x values, negative 4 and 5. So I'm going to find the absolute value of negative 4, which is 4. I'm going to find the absolute value of 5, which is 5. And now I know because they're a straight line on the x-axis, and they're both, one's 4, I should say, and one is 5 away from 0, I can just add those up. 4 plus 5, and I get the distance between them is 9 units. So looking at our next example here, we're going to consider a line segment that has endpoints 0, negative 6 and 0, negative 11. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plot those points. So 0, negative 6 is right there. 0, negative 11 is right there. My segment goes from there to there. Okay, and I want to find out, what do the endpoints have in common? So again, if I'm thinking about these endpoints, I can see, okay, both of the x-coordinates are 0. And if I know that both x-coordinates are 0, I should know that they're going to end up on an axis, which, looking at my line, I can see they're on the y-axis. So it's a vertical line on the y-axis. So now I'm asked to find the length of the segment. Now looking at this, and if I think about last time, and I use absolute value, okay, absolute value tells me how far a number is away from 0. So I can find that I have negative 11's absolute value, I can find negative 6's absolute value, but I don't want to add them this time. The reason I don't want to add them is because I can see that going from negative 11 to 0, going from there to there, will actually include the distance from negative 6 to 0. Okay, so if I add those up, I'm going to actually have way longer than what that is. So what I need to do is I don't need to add this time, I need to subtract. because my values are on the same side of 0, I need to subtract. Let me say that again. Because my numbers or my values that I'm finding the absolute value of are on the same side of 0, I'm going to need to find their absolute values, then subtract. So I'm going to find the absolute value of negative 11, which is equal to 11. I'm going to find the absolute value of negative 6, which is 6. And then I'm going to subtract the 2. 11 minus 6 is equal to 5. So 5 units. And again, by using my graph here, I can count how many units it actually is just to check and make sure I did that right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I went up 5 units, or I went down 5 units depending on where your starting and ending point are. But again, if you didn't have a coordinate plane, we can now solve this by using our absolute values and either adding or subtracting. Okay, now let's look at an example without actually using a coordinate plane. So we want to consider a segment with endpoints negative 3, 3 and negative 3, 5. And the first thing I want to think about is, what do the endpoints have in common? So what do they both have in common? Well, both have x coordinates of negative 3. And so if they both have the same x coordinate, that's telling me that they're both, or that they are going to form a vertical line segment. So now that I know that they both have the same x-coordinate of negative 3, which means they're forming a vertical line segment, I should be able to find the length of the segment. So now what I'm going to have to think about is, okay, I know I'm going to have to find the absolute value of my y-coordinates here. So I need to find the absolute value of 3, which is 3. I need to find the absolute value of 5, which is 5. Which now makes me think, okay, if my original numbers were both the same sign, should I be adding or should I be subtracting once I find the absolute value? Well, if they're both on the same side of 0, so they both have the same sign, that means I need to subtract. So I'm going to subtract 5 minus 3, which is 2. And then I get the length of my line segment being 2 units. So a little trick for us to remember here. After I find, or I should say even before I find the absolute value, if I'm looking at the different coordinates, okay, the coordinates that are not the same, so I know that it forms a straight line, but I don't know whether I should add or subtract. If the signs are the same, then we subtract. Okay, so if they were both negative numbers, we subtract. If they're both positive numbers, we subtract. If the signs are different, then we add. Okay, so if you have one positive and one negative, you add those two with the absolute value. If one's negative and one's positive, you add them once you find the absolute value.